I had the pleasure last night to spend some time with David Fricke and his wife Beryl, and they are wonderful people. And one of the things I want you to listen for in his remarks today are how he came to do what he did. This is a man who trained as a doctor, ended up spending a lot of his life overseas, helping underserved people, helping to make a real difference in the lives of people in far-off places, some places that you could not locate on a map, I would bet. And why did he do that instead of living the normal life that many of his classmates did right here in Philadelphia? And I'm very pleased we have some of his classmates with us today, some members of the class of '52. We have some members of the class of '43, the class that Ben Reed was a part of. So listen carefully. I think you're going to really be intrigued by our speaker and his commitment to service and what he's done for others. But to introduce the entire program, the Ben Reed Lecture, and talk about Ben Reed, let me bring up one of our great graduates from the class of 1943, Mr. Joe Gordon. Joe.
Thank you, Ham. I'm supposed to give you Ben Reed in 2 minutes or less. I'll do my best. Most of you have heard this story before. Ben Reed was the class of '43, like Bill Lander and myself, and it was Bill, myself, and a small group of others who created the Ben Reed Lecture after Ben died. Ben was a wonderful student. He was a wonderful athlete. And he won the Marcoux Award. And this says a great deal about Ben Reed. The member of his graduating class who, in the opinion of his classmates, is the most honorable and upright, the most unselfish and thoughtful of others. Wow, that's pretty darn good. In any event, he went on to a great career. He was in the Marine Corps in the Marianas and in China in World War II. He was a Phi Beta Kappa at Williams. He then went through law school and down to Washington, and in Washington had a great career, a most distinguished statesman. He was, in 1961, he went into the State Department as the Executive Secretary of the Department of State. That's number 4 in the State Department. That's pretty high. And he served in the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. He then went on to be the founding director of the Woodrow Wilson School for International Scholars. He was the founding director of the German Marshall Fund. And then he went back into the State Department in the Carter administration and was an advisor to presidents, therefore, in 2 or 3 decades, and was always in public service and doing great things for his country. Now, one thing that impressed me was that at the end, after he died, he so impressed everyone that knew him in Washington, and many did. And this is what one little squib from a half-page article written by a nationally syndicated columnist. This wasn't an obituary, this was a column, and the story was at least a half a page. And here's what they said about Ben. Reed impressed all he met as a man of immense principle, gentle, kindly, totally without pretension. That was Ben Reed, and I hope it was under 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Joe. Let me share with you just very briefly some things that aren't in the program in terms of the introduction of our speaker. First of all, he's a graduate of Wesleyan and then Penn Medical. He and his wife, Beryl, have been a team during this entire time, so they'll be working together. They spoke in one of my ethics sections, first period, And one of the things we're doing in that class at the moment is taking a look at what values are driving any situation that the students find themselves in. Or what values do you see in a movie that is really driving the narrative? As Ham indicated, I'd like you to listen to what actually drove David and Beryl in terms of such a purpose-driven life. Also, you see less cans here in the chapel than you saw last Friday, and at the end, Jack and Kim have an update in terms of how things are going and where things are going and that kind of thing. Very appropriate today that we have David in the midst of all these cans and that kind of thing, because he's a person who really has spent his life, and Beryl her life, in serving the underserved in some of the most volatile places in the world that they will be talking about, or David will be talking about, and Beryl will be assisting. Please stand to greet our speaker, Dr. David Fricke.
Yes, you've got the name Fricke or Fricke. Fricke is proper German, but in this country, Fricke seems to be what's taken. I thank you very much for this opportunity to speak here and to present something. I wanted to say a word about values, but I certainly agree wholeheartedly with the values of Episcopal, and particularly the emphasis on the whole person, the body, the mind, and the spirit. It's great to have the courage to address the spiritual side of life, and this is what drives us ultimately. Spirit is what gives us energy. So it's been wonderful to see your new campus and to contemplate the great things that you will accomplish in the future. Like many of you, my childhood consisted of a lot of activity and fun, but I grew up to be a very shy person. I was one of 7 kids in a blended family, and the problem was that I had difficulty in having long and good conversations with others. When I was sent to Episcopal Academy, I was badly uprooted. For some reason, I did not do well on a math test and had to have hot tutoring under the sun in the summer before, but it turned out I did okay. Once school was underway, I found some new friends, and I hope you'll enjoy these pictures. They will not be all on the talk. Can you hear me okay? A little louder, a little closer. Excuse me. Thank you. During school, perhaps I had focused more on doing rather than on being. I think that's the American way, but we've learned as Christians and as world citizens that who we are is more than what we do. In fact, the motto fits this esse quam videre. So, as I said, I didn't relate that closely to other kids, and I realized that this was better at a younger age. At a younger age, you have more in common with children your own age, and it's amazing that even at the age of 3 or 4, even though you don't speak the language, you can have fun with Afghan kids like our son David here in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, or at an older age, our grandchildren with this Kyrgyz girl in Kyrgyzstan, a dear friend of ours, and they would even talk late at night. So as I was getting into school and learning and going through, I was wondering if, I was wondering what the direction of life should be. And I love this poem by Robert Frost, which starts, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. Which path would I take? I wonder if I had taken the road less taken. So as I thought, I considered that I really had a lot to be thankful for. more than 99% of the kids in my age have less. I had the blessings of good health, freedom, education, and thanks to my parents for financial support. I realized that here at Episcopal we have so much to be thankful for, and the Lord said, from everyone who has been given, much will be demanded or required. Although we don't need to feel guilty about that, it is a fact of life, and I think we have joy when we are able to give something of what we have received. I found that there are many kids who have a lot less. Here is one of a 15-year-old boy. His mother is blind. They're in a homeless shelter in Kyrgyzstan and in Bishkek, and he had to go to the bazaar and work every day to bring her food. So that was his life rather than schooling. Or these kids in central Afghanistan who have absolutely nothing. You'll see Bandi Amir later on in Hazarajat, high altitude, herding sheep, gathering what they can for food. Or the kids now under the control of the Taliban who have no life. Recently I spoke with a young man from Pakistan. He told me how the Taliban had shot his father because he would not give up his kids to be trained with the Taliban. Miraculously, he and his mother escaped, and they are now living in Silver Spring, Maryland. He explained what the Taliban do, how they take young children from their home, bring them into their camp, and feed and train them. They are taught that they must obey in order to survive and for their families not to be harmed. Their survival is attached to some ideology, and the ideology controls their lives. These kids will have no childhood, no chance to play and develop. Their lives will be stunted. They will lack normal creativity and the ability to make decisions and to enjoy life. This is an ongoing tragedy. We are so fortunate here, and we really need to pray for people like this who are having a very difficult life. So, thinking about direction, there were a couple of things in my past which gave me some ideas. The first was very strange. I was once driving the family car in Wynwood when I was I guess, just barely able to drive. And I picked up a hitchhiker and helped him on the way. When I dropped him off, I felt really good. Even though I disobeyed my parents, I had a certain feeling of joy after I had done that. And later I reflected on that, and I wondered, what is joy? Joy is a word from the Latin gaudia, which means happiness, great pleasure, delight. And it results from deep satisfaction. But I think it also has the connotation of good health and wholeness. The second observation was simply reading the Bible, listening to the simple reading of the Bible in chapel and in church. By the way, here's a picture of Dr. Doolittle and Greville Haslam from before. So while we're thinking about that, I want you to, and Bob is here. This is at the Junto at Episcopal. Here's the scholium. So a couple of verses impressed me, and as we were saying last night, sometimes these things stick in your head, and they emerge later when you think about them. In senior year, we went to a Brian Greene crusade. All the Episcopal churches in Philadelphia were invited to some kind of a rally in Convention Hall. And in spite of the idea that discussions about religion or politics at the dinner table were not allowed, we went. So Brian Greene explained the necessity not only of believing the scriptures and being good, but that a clear decision to accept Jesus Christ as Lord is a necessary response for every individual. So that was a very interesting revelation to me. Hadn't really thought about it before.